Okay, jumping back into it where we left off, it's the dead of winter. It's freezing and wet. Just imagine what that must have been like to try to march from Kaskaskia, just south of Cahokia, to all the way to Vincennes. Very long way, if you don't know. All the way across Illinois, in fact, and part way through Indiana, what is now Indiana. So yeah, basically we left off where he felt like he had to, motivate the men. So he put the gunpowder and the mud on his face and did the war whoop, and they jumped into the water, and they saw his enthusiasm. This was when they got to the Wabash, actually. So that's, after the many, many miserable miles of floodplains. So, they sang songs, they lifted each other's spirits. They had a very good system down. He was very smart as far as having people work in shifts while they were camped out to hunt, and other people to try to make canoes, to kind of like shuttle some of the weaker people to the front during certain periods. Some of the French were trying to defect. He wasn't having it. He ordered that they be killed if anybody tried to defect, no matter, what their nationality was. Walking through the flood was tough. And finally they found what is known as Warrior Island, which is actually within eyesight of Fort Sackville. And, they found some people on horses, some young men actually, and took them hostage to try to get some intel on them. He knew he was going to have to bluff, right? His boat of supplies that he had coming that were supposed to meet him there never arrived. So what does he do? He sends a letter, first of all, to the townspeople saying, stay in your house. We're taking the fort. You can join us or help us, and you'll be rewarded, and we'll greet you as an ally. It'll be a grand acceptance for you. Or, you can be an enemy, and, if we see you out of your house, you can get it too. So that was his kind of gauntlet thrown, man. And he confronted the fort in person after that to intimidate Hamilton and the other inhabitants of the fort. What that did was it ruined the element of surprise, because they knew he was there then, but he also was bluffing about his army's numbers, like I said. And how he did that was he used like the lay of the land to make it look like more, positioning people strategically. They stole flags and horses to make it seem like they had resources that they didn't really have. And he sent people around to the back of the fort to try to tunnel into their supplies and to light stuff on fire, basically. And he sent another company out into the town to disperse kind of on the edges of the fort to get ready to, post up and get ready for the scrap to begin. So it did. And they fired on this fort all night. They were busting caps on this fort literally all night. Meanwhile, some of George Rogers Clark's people were in the fort as prisoner. Helm and Tobacco's son, the native chief, were in there and they were about to cause a ruckus inside. And George Rogers Clark met some natives. They were relatives of Tobacco's son, and they said, listen, we can bring all the reinforcements. Let's go. He didn't want to do that. The reason he didn't want to do that is because he didn't want to have to try to distinguish between enemy and friendly natives in the dark on the battlefield, because a lot of their enemies were native that were paid by the British. So anyway, the townspeople, some of the merchants and stuff ended up saying, okay, here's some gunpowder, here's some projectiles. We're going to, hit you with some resources. I'm sure they probably gathered some men. Seems like they all wanted the British gone to me. George Rogers Clark, like I said, they fired for that night on the fort big time. His men constructed these janky kind of fortifications, and they positioned themselves tactically to kind of like stay out of range of like the cannons that they had, but they really couldn't even get a shot off from those cannon holes, because the bottom line is they couldn't outshoot those Kentucky riflemen. Them Kentucky country boys were not playing, dude. They were like, they made their whole life depended on them being a good shot with that rifle at the time, whether it be defending from native attackers, which on the frontier of Kentucky was huge at the time, or just hunting for food. So he used a lot of psychological warfare, which is interesting because he would have men post up outside those places within earshot of Hamilton's men, and they would be talking trash and joking and just in very good spirits, and that really was a damaging blow, I'm sure. So George Rogers Clark, he had like maybe 200 guys with him, so he was not necessarily that bad outmanned and outgunned, but they couldn't get shots off with the cannons. Them Kentucky riflemen were too real with their aim. So a couple evenings later, Hamilton raises a truce flag, and Clark figured he was just trying to buy time for reinforcements. So he said he's not going to agree to anything but a full surrender, straight up. I mean, which he declines. And he basically, he bluffs and he says, listen, my American guys, they're bloodthirsty. They want to kill you all right now. He was just playing so much psychological warfare to try to get Hamilton out, which he did. Eventually, February 25th, 1779, Hamilton would surrender. With that victory, this is why it's important, Americans would secure the western part of America. It was known as the Northwest, for what would eventually become the United States. All of the Illinois territory, stuff like that. So it was very, very important. George Rogers Clark, he was very fair to the British soldiers who were defeated. In exchange for them spreading the word of their defeat, he let them go. Even gave them enough resources to split. And I want to make it clear here, I'm not like trying to romanticize this guy. He was in no way perfect. His intentions were good, I believe. He could be brutal. He could be very brutal. He was capable of great violence. But a lot of that had to do with what was at stake at the time. When you put it in context, it's kind of hard to put yourself in his shoes. And even, this is a guy who worked as a surveyor the first of his life, and he studied native culture and their ways, and he loved their way of life. It was very similar to his way of life in some ways. Obviously, there were some stark differences between European and native ways of life. I'm not making the claim that they are exactly the same, but the point being, Tobacco's son and other natives were his lifelong friends, and even in his retirement, they came to smoke tobacco with him and kind of remember their times together. He retired in and around the Louisville, Kentucky area, and was virtually unheard of after that, and in great debt. He died in great debt, and there literally would not be what we know of as the United States without him, in many, many ways. So that's what this is for. This memorial is super cool. I hope that you guys get time to check this out at some point. Anyway, I know I ran through this really quick. I just wanted to touch on some things. This is not an in-depth analysis. This is just for fun, and hopefully you had, some sort of information that you didn't before from this video. And thank you for watching. As always, peace. And by the way, pause this video on this frame here and check out this dope ironwork or whatever this is, because you can see on the left at the top almost, if I can, I don't know if you can see it or not, but there's actually like all the zodiac signs are around it above that militia head, face, and the Native American face. But like the top left, you can see Capricorn, and then to the far right was Aquarius. It's actually really cool. A lot of symbolism going on there. Anyway, peace out. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it.